Hi there, this is Kat Sturtz from rockingyourpath.com with another episode of Fast Action Fridays. And today my special guest is Dr. Gala Gorman, who is going to be talking about addiction awareness. Is that what we talked about? Awareness, addiction? What are we talking about here?
What I was talking to you about is aware appreciation.
Aware appreciation. And there we go. And I know we had talked about
using this technique, this practice, to turn things around in our lives. And so addiction is just one of the things that could use an about face.
Right. Absolutely. And that's how we got. There's so many addictions out there and they come in all forms, but without awareness, nothing happens. So I love that. And it's been a theme all month for being aware. So first of all, can you tell everybody a little bit about yourself?
So my name is Dr. Gala Gorman, and I grew up in Las Vegas. Actually lived in Las Vegas for over 30 years. People love that little tidbit of there because it just doesn't add up. In fact, I was playing a game in introductions when I was in the Philippines. We were just talking about my trip to the Philippines. And so I gave them several. You were supposed to tell the group 2 truths and 1 lie. And they were supposed to figure out which one was the lie. So one of the truths is that I lived in Las Vegas for over 30 years, and they were all shocked when they found out that was. So I went to school in Las Vegas. My family moved there when I was young. I went to school in Las Vegas, and long story short, ended up as a certified public accountant, owned an accounting firm, and sold that in 1997, sold it to my partner, and was just ready to do something different.
Wow, I guess you did.
Yeah, I had been doing that for about 20 years and was pretty much done, and knew that I wanted to get into coaching and speaking, have a heart for personal growth and development, and ended up getting a master's degree in human development and then on to a doctorate. Written several books along the theme of practical spirituality. And along the path, I had somebody point out to me that my writing and teaching is very helpful to people who are struggling with addiction. Mm-hmm. And so, to make a long story short, when I got together with my husband, we kind of put our efforts together and have developed programs specifically for, he works directly with addicts, but we've developed a program that is primarily focused on helping the family members and friends of addicts, that we call them recovery stakeholders, because
I love that term.
And yeah, so what I was sharing with you is that I'm launching a new show called Recovery Revolution, and it will be live by the time this airs. And so one of the segments in that show is something that I call aware appreciation. And so we're going to talk a little bit more about that. But I moved from Las Vegas I moved from Las Vegas to Colorado, then I moved back to Las Vegas, then I moved to Nashville, and now my husband and I live in Hilton Head, South Carolina. So
that's awesome. Yeah.
Long story shortened somewhat.
Well, but what you touched on were all the things that drew me to you when we first met in a NAMS community insiders meeting. And we've got the spiritual connection. We've got the business connection. I don't have any addictions except really quirky ones, but I'm one of those stakeholders who had a mother who had an addiction problem, and I have other family members, and I have friends who have varying degrees. Some are, past that recovery stage and are pretty stable. Some are still facing that. Some are still looking for that moment when it dawns on them or they're ready to accept that. So I love that term, that a stakeholder, because it really solidifies for me that feeling that we really care about these people, and what happens to them does affect us in some ways. Sometimes, it can prevent us from doing other things, and sometimes we move beyond that. So can you tell us more about that and bring us around into some of the tips that can help us with this appreciation awareness?
So recovery stakeholders typically are spouses or siblings or a parent that has a child that has struggled with addiction. And these days it's just far too common for kids to go down the wrong path as a result of being bullied or just feeling ill prepared to deal with life, and they find their way to drugs or video games or
food.
Food is very, very much one that is challenging. So with addictions, if you know much about them, they're typically either substances or processes. So process addictions can be particularly challenging because a lot of process addictions are things that we normally do in life. We can't stop eating, right?
Right.
And so to learn to eat in a healthy way can be really challenging. So it's hard when you are the one standing on the sidelines and you really have very little control, and yet the behavior of this other person is dramatically affecting you in your life. So, right. So one of the things with this, I created this aware appreciation practice. It was a synthesis of a bunch of different things that I had come across. And what it consists of is daily appreciating 10 different areas, really. And I have what I call an aware appreciation worksheet that you can use. Cool. Walk through this practice. And the questions are designed to stretch us and make us really think. Because, it's easy to say, oh, yes, I appreciate my husband, or I appreciate my house, or I appreciate something. But when the way I've posed the questions, it really forces you to stretch beyond and to think, like, why do I really appreciate that?
Is it lip service? Because
to bring some richness to it, because that's where the creative juices really start flowing. So it was fascinating because this really is all about relationships and how we're affected by relationships, right? So my husband and I worked together in this business and in this endeavor, and we were at a workshop, and one of the practices that this workshop leader suggested was every evening to challenge yourself to find and share 3 things about your mate that you appreciate before going to bed. And you share that with each other. And so we returned back to another workshop a couple months later, and we were following up. And I shared that one of my real insights was that no matter how frustrated I am with my partner, mate, in order to share 3 things that I really appreciate about him with him, I have to suspend all of that frustration and negativity, just even for the moments that I'm sharing the appreciation, that gets suspended. And then what I find is that I have to think about it before I allow myself to go back to a negative place, because I was just in this really positive place. And it helps us to see that both are true. You know, nothing is all good, nothing is all bad. And there are things that we wish were different, but there are also things that we really appreciate and that are really good. And so, you know, even when you're dealing with a loved one who's struggling with addiction, it can be really helpful to just remind yourself of what you love about this person, and to kind of separate the addiction from the person. That's one of the things that we talk about.
Oh, yeah. I can see, even in my own life, how that can interfere, not letting that suspension of disbelief type thing get cloud you. It's like, yeah, I really love and appreciate this about them. But then there was this time they did something that was completely different from what I want to appreciate. So, all right. So how do we do that?
Well, it's a practice. And one of the other things that I have found really interesting about it is that we get attached to our story and our issues. And so we don't want to practice what's going to pull us out of it. We want to stay in our own,
our little bubbles. It's what I call us, you know, ignoring
our version of the story, right?
Yeah, ignoring the elephant in the path in front of us.
Right. And so the practicing this, if you'll practice this, what my suggestion is to practice it for a week and commit to it for a week. If you can make it a week, commit to another week. And by the time you have made it through 6 weeks, there's we hear often in spiritual practices, 40 days, for example, 40 times is a real kind of key. And it's when you're creating new habits and forming new patterns in the brain, that 6-week period tends to really be a key.
Right.
And so if you'll practice it every day for 6 weeks, you will find that you have begun to really change the tide. Things will start turning around. And that may not mean that your loved one who's struggling with this problem or with any situation, we still can't change the other person. But
right.
I am different now. And once I'm different, then everything around me starts.
How we respond starts to change. And and I know from moving through things myself and helping clients, sometimes an extended practice means that you commit to it one more day.
Yeah.
One more day.
One day at a time, very much.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. All right. So do you have some fast action tips for us to get started with this process?
So I would suggest that you listen to the show and listen to my Aware Appreciation segment for, even if you only have a few minutes.
And we'll have the link in the replay.
I will, yes. And I go through a breathing exercise that is just takes a few minutes, and I designed it so that you could be driving or, exercising, anything.
So not having time is not an excuse.
Exactly. And so then once you've gone through that kind of centering mindfulness practice, I challenge you to think of one big thing that you appreciate. And so that's a start. That's a fast action start tip. And if you catch a little fire with that, then I suggest that you download the Aware Appreciation Worksheet and you get started, as we talked about, one day at a time, and see if you can commit to a week, and then keep adding to it until you really create habit out of it. I think you'll find that it won't take long before you miss it if you don't do it, because it allows you to just see your life and the day in front of you and your experiences in a
that's a really good tip for understanding if we've made that transition into really appreciating something or really developing a better habit about something, is when you start missing not doing it. I drink a pea rice protein every morning. And I know from being on it for over a year now, the first couple of weeks is like, oh, but it's my go-to, and I miss it. I gravitate back to it. So.
It's really interesting. I started sort of transitioning to a paleo eating program. I've got some food sensitivities, gluten in particular.
Yeah, I am gluten sensitive.
Yeah,
so.
And one of the suggestions was that you even eliminate oats. And so I make homemade granola with nuts and would put oats in it. And I thought, well, how am I going to do this? So I came up with the idea to use flake coconut and put flake coconut in the granola. And it's actually really good. And when I was in the Philippines, that was one of the things I missed the most, was my granola with almond milk. I couldn't wait to get home and make some fresh granola with some almond milk.
All right. So I really like that tip, that really, if you don't feel yourself yearning for this, maybe you haven't really embraced the practice at the deepest level you should be aiming for here. I want to back up just a little bit, because I can hear some of my clients and some of my friends with their butt questions here.
Okay.
All right. So can you give us some examples of what it's like not to go into that suspension mode and not really go into the deeper mode of appreciation, and staying at that surface level? Oh yeah, I appreciate my husband does the dishes, that's okay. But tell us more about that, because I find that area that you mentioned really fascinating. And I think a lot of us really don't think about it in those terms.
So I'm looking here at my aware appreciations from this morning. And
just to recap, this is something you still do all the time.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's a very important practice.
Okay.
So I've had this wicked jet lag I was sharing with you from my trip. And I've been waking up at crazy odd times. So this morning I was awake again at 2:00. I tried to go back to sleep and I couldn't go back to sleep. I finally just got up. I believe it was about 4:00. And my sort of rule of thumb is, if the light's not outside, I have no business being up. Right? That's just, it's just my thing. There were times in my life where that was not the case, but now I live by, the sun needs to be up at least. So I found myself this morning, it took a little working through my resistance, but I found myself getting a project done that I really needed to get done to move some things forward. And so when I did my aware appreciations, I stretched myself to appreciate getting up early, even as tired as I was, and that, you know, this has been going on for far too long, and it's not getting better the way I would like for it to get better. And so it would be very easy for me to say this not sleeping thing is debilitating and just use it as an excuse to throw in the towel.
Right. And be grateful you're home.
Right. Exactly. I'm home, but I'm going to just grumble about jet lag and not sleeping and be miserable and make everybody around me miserable.
Mm-hmm.
Or I can not fight it, and I can look for the what to appreciate in it. And so the stretching to appreciate, as you were talking about, is especially powerful when we have been grumbling about something.
Mm.
When you are at odds with any experience in your life, that could be a person, place, or thing, that is the time to practice awareness and to say, that's really interesting. I've got something stuck in my craw on that. And what could I see in this that is something I could appreciate? And then you get a little momentum going with it.
Right. So what you might write down today could be completely different from what you wrote down the day before, or what you might experience the next day.
Well, and that's one of the beauties of the Aware Appreciation Worksheet and why we do it every day, because it is different every day. Mm. And part of the stretch is to make it different every day, to not the people. There's one of the questions relates to people that we've encountered. And one day it might be the clerk at the grocery store. One day it might be my personal trainer at the gym. One day it might be some totally irritating customer service person because they really forced me to see something that I really needed to see. So yes, absolutely. It's about, it's kind of a snowball effect. The more we appreciate, the more we see to appreciate.
All right. That prompts another question.
Sure.
How do you describe the difference between appreciation and gratitude?
So gratitude typically is used typically in two ways. One, it doesn't have a whole lot of energy behind it. Oh, thanks a lot. Thank you very much. We say it just without even thinking about it, right?
Almost that surface level appreciation.
Yeah, exactly. Very surfacey. Or it has a pleading energy, where there's there must be an exchange that happens. You do this, I'll say thank you.
A reciprocation.
I do this, you have to say thank you. So there's this you can
anticipation of reciprocation.
Well, and expectations not met on one side or the other. Appreciation is void of that.
Okay.
There is no expectation from the outside world. It's my personal experience and my personal responsibility to find ways to appreciate the experiences.
Oh, I like that distinction. It's very clear where the responsibility lies, which I think is at the heart of your program, to get to this awareness and the appreciation. You have to be inside. It's got to come from inside you, not just looking out and it's like, oh, okay, I've got a meal today. I can be grateful for that. Or, Yeah, that's awesome. All right. Now, I know we're going to have a link available so people can get this worksheet, which
Yes.
I'm anxious to grab myself because
Okay.
I'm all for personal development. We have a lot of similarities. One that is not a similarity is that I'm a cat person. I may be Kathleen or Kathy or Cat, but my mother named me well and that I like night. I do, and I've always done a lot of my best work at night, so I don't need the daytime. I can sleep.
Well, some people do. They're up in the middle of the night, and that is not me typically. So
Yeah, I spent 25 years milking cows and doing ESL tutoring, where I was up at at godly hours to make things, and I made it work, and I can do it. It's just not my preference. So
yeah.
I'm looking forward to looking deeper to find out why I appreciate that. And I'm quirky. I gotta say, I'm quirky. That's part of who I am. But again, you've given me a different way to look at things that I thought I had a pretty good handle on. So I'm really excited to explore those. And I hope the viewers are too. I think they will be. Yeah. So we're getting close to our time. Okay. I would like you to go ahead and share with people some of the upcoming programs that you've recently launched.
So I've got a couple of shows that are launching. One is called Recovery Revolution, and it is specifically designed for people who are family members and friends of people struggling with addiction. And the tagline, the subhead is love the addict, outsmart the addiction.
Oh, so, awesome.
Yeah, so that's the Recovery Revolution, and it is found on our site recoveryes.com. And then my other show is awarenessaddicts.com, and it's more designed for people who aren't dealing with somebody that's struggling with addiction, and that's not kind of consuming them. But we do talk about a lot of similar concepts. And the Awareness Addicts show is found on the awarenessaddicts.com site. And that's where you can also find the Aware Appreciation Worksheet.
Awesome.
And so I look forward to seeing you over there and having your followers check me out.
I think that's great. And I know that I am grateful you joined me today, but I go deeper than that. I really appreciate this additional insight that, I have to be honest, I hadn't ever thought about from that frame of mind. And, I'm no spring chicken, so some things like, yeah, I heard that before. And yeah, I know a lot of people about this, but some of this was a completely new reframing that I deeply appreciate and want to explore that more. Why is it so meaningful to me right now? For one reason. So,
well, right. I'm glad I could flash the light bulb for you.
Oh, yes. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being with us today, and definitely want to have you back sometime.
Fantastic. Thanks for having me. It was a delight.
And this is Kat Sturtz from rockingyourpath.com, closing another episode of Fast Action Fridays. We record these live, folks, so little blips happen here. Be sure to tune in next week and check out my next fabulous guest. And in the meantime, remember to keep rocking your unique path to success. Bye-bye.